When the Duchess kissed the servant at midnight, she whispered a secret that could ruin the crown. His mouth tasted of stolen bread and desperation, and as Duchess Vivian Ashford pressed her trembling lips against those of Thomas Webb, a servant who had no right to breathe her name, let alone taste her tears, she whispered the words that would either save them both or damn an entire kingdom. The king's heir is not his blood. In the shadows of the palace garden, with moonlight spilling across her silk gown like an accusation, she had just committed treason with a kiss, and the gardener's son who had loved her since childhood now held the power to destroy everything she had sacrificed 17 years to protect. Wait, before the next confession unfolds, if this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. Thomas pulled away as though she had burned him, his calloused hands falling from where they had instinctively caught her waist when she'd stumbled toward him. His eyes, those impossible eyes, gray as winter storms and filled with a tenderness that had haunted her through every loveless year of her marriage, searched her face in the darkness. "Your Grace," he breathed, the title like gravel in his throat. "What have you done?" Vivian's hands shook as she gathered her composure, pulling the midnight blue cloak tighter around her shoulders. At 35, she was still beautiful in the way that sorrow carves beauty into a woman's face. Sharp cheekbones, lips that had forgotten how to smile, and eyes the color of smoke that had witnessed too many secrets. Her dark hair, threaded with silver she refused to hide, had come loose from its pins during her frantic run through the garden. "I've told you the truth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The truth I've carried alone for 17 years. The truth that will kill me if I don't speak it aloud to someone who—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Someone who once loved me. Someone who might still see the girl I was before I became this." The palace loomed behind them, its windows blazing with candlelight. Inside, the autumn ball continued. Courtiers dancing and scheming while the king, her husband, Duke Edmund Ashford, celebrated the engagement announcement of Crown Prince Nicholas, the boy who would one day rule England, the boy who was not the king's son. Thomas had been trimming the rose bushes when she'd found him, had looked up with that same expression of longing and resignation he'd worn the day she'd married Edmund 18 years ago. She had been 17 then, a baron's daughter with no fortune but her face, and Thomas had been 15, a gardener's apprentice who had given her wild flowers and poetry written in a shaking hand. "You shouldn't be here," Thomas said now, glancing toward the palace. "Let them see." The words came out fierce, reckless. "I'm dying, Thomas." His face went pale in the moonlight. "What?" Vivian pulled down the collar of her gown, revealing the angry red marks that had spread across her throat and collarbone over the past 3 months. In the candlelight of her chambers, she could hide them with powder and high necklines. But here, under the moon's unforgiving gaze, they looked like the fingerprints of death itself. "The physicians call it the wasting sickness," she said. "I have perhaps 6 months, maybe less." She released the fabric, covering the marks again. "And when I die, the secret dies with me. Unless I tell someone. Unless I—" Her voice broke. "I couldn't die without seeing you again. Without telling someone the truth of what I've done." Thomas moved closer, and she could smell the earth on him, the honest sweat of labor, so different from the perfumes and pomades of the court. "The Crown Prince," he said slowly, understanding dawning like a terrible sunrise. "Nicholas isn't the king's son. Then who's—" "Do you remember the summer I was 18? Vivian's hands clenched at her sides. "When Edmund left for 6 months to oversee his northern estates, When I thought I would die from loneliness in this vast, empty palace, married to a man who looked at me like I was a painting he'd purchased. Thomas' jaw tightened. I remember. Lord Philip Morland was visiting from France. The name fell from her lips like a stone into dark water. The king's younger brother. He was kind to me. He made me laugh. And I was so lonely, Thomas. So desperately, achingly lonely. Edmund had already taken 3 mistresses by then. She stopped, unable to explain the hollow ache of being a wife in name only, an ornament with no purpose beyond smiling at dinner parties. You had an affair, Thomas said flatly. For 3 months, Vivian forced herself to meet his gaze. It was foolish and selfish, and I knew it was wrong, even as She drew a shaking breath. When Edmund returned, I discovered I was with child. I had no choice but to lie, to claim the timing was right, that the baby was conceived just before Edmund left. He believed me. Everyone believed me. Thomas ran a hand through his sandy hair, leaving it wild. And Lord Philip died in a riding accident when Nicholas was 2 years old. Vivian's voice hollowed out. He never knew. I never told him. He went to his grave thinking our time together was just a brief, meaningless dalliance. So the boy who will inherit the throne has Morland blood, not Ashford blood, has no legal right to the crown he's been groomed to wear since birth. Vivian felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she had learned long ago not to let them fall. And I am the only living soul who knows the truth. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the distant strains of violin music drifting from the palace and the whisper of wind through the roses. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Why, tell me, Vivian? Why now? She flinched at her given name on his lips. He hadn't spoken it in 18 years. Because you're the only person in this world who ever knew me. The real me, before I became the Duchess, before I learned to lie with every breath. Because she stopped, the next words too dangerous, too true. Because I needed to tell someone who might understand that I'm not a monster, that I was just a girl who made a terrible mistake and has spent 17 years protecting a son I love more than my own life. Does Nicholas know? God, no. Vivian's hand flew to her throat. He can never know. If the truth came out, the scandal would tear the kingdom apart. The Ashford line has held the crown for 3 generations. To discover the heir is illegitimate, born of adultery. She couldn't finish. The consequences were too vast, too terrible. Thomas stepped closer, and now she could see the lines that time and labor had carved around his eyes, the silver threading his temples. He was still handsome in a raw, weathered way that made her heart ache with memories of who they'd both been. So, you plan to take this secret to your grave? Yes, the word came out as a whisper. But I needed someone to know, to bear witness that I existed beyond this lie I've been living, that once I was Vivian March, a girl who loved wildflowers and poetry, not just the Duchess who smiled and lied and protected a secret that could destroy everything. You're still her, Thomas said quietly. That girl, I see her in you still. The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. Don't what? Don't be kind to me. Don't look at me like that. I don't deserve. Vivian turned away, unable to bear the tenderness in his gaze. I committed adultery and treason. I've let an illegitimate child believe he's destined to be king. I'm a liar and a coward. And you've protected your son with everything you have. Thomas's hand caught her shoulder, gently turning her back. You've given him a chance at the life he's built. You've carried this burden alone for 17 years while dying inside. That's not cowardice, Vivian. That's sacrifice. Or selfishness. She forced herself to hold his gaze. Maybe I just couldn't bear to lose him. Couldn't face what would happen if the truth came out. Maybe both things can be true. Thomas's thumb brushed against her shoulder, and she realized she was shaking. You can love him and be terrified, and make mistakes, and still be worth something. Still be the girl He stopped, jaw clenching. Still be worth saving. I'm dying, Thomas. There's no saving me. Then let me carry this secret for you. The words came out fierce, almost angry. Let me be the one who knows, who remembers Vivian March and everything she sacrificed. When you're gone, I'll keep your secret. I'll take it to my grave. Why would you do that? Vivian's voice broke. After everything, after I married Edmund and abandoned you and disappeared into this golden cage, why would you help me? Thomas's hand fell away, and he stepped back, putting distance between them. Because I made you a promise once. Do you remember? The day before your wedding, when you came to say goodbye? She remembered. God, she remembered every word, every look, every moment of that heartbreak. You said you'd always protect me, even if I didn't want you to. I keep my promises. Thomas's voice was rough, even the ones that hurt. They stood in the darkness, two people separated by 18 years and a chasm of choices that could never be unmade. In the distance, Vivian could hear voices, courtiers stepping out for air, guards making their rounds. Soon, someone would notice her absence. The Duke would wonder where his ornamental wife had disappeared to. "I should go," she said, but didn't move. Yes, Thomas didn't move either. If anyone knew I was here with you, I know. Thomas. His name felt dangerous in her mouth, intimate in a way your grace and my lord and all the proper titles could never be. I'm sorry. For everything. For not being brave enough to choose differently all those years ago. I'm not. The confession surprised them both. If you'd married me, you'd have lived in a cottage with dirt floors and struggled to feed our children. You'd have worked yourself to exhaustion and died young anyway, probably in childbirth, because we couldn't afford physicians. At least this way. He gestured toward the palace, toward her silk gown and jeweled fingers. At least you've lived in comfort. At least your son has had every advantage. At least I've been miserable in luxury, Vivian said bitterly. What a gift. Would you rather have been miserable in poverty? The question hung between them like a blade. Vivian had no answer, because the truth was complicated and messy and couldn't be reduced to simple choices. She had been 17 and terrified and powerless, and she had made the only choice available to a girl with no fortune and no prospects beyond her beauty. I would rather have been brave, she said finally, but I wasn't. And now here we are. Here we are. Thomas agreed softly. Vivian heard footsteps on the gravel path, someone approaching. Without thinking, she grabbed Thomas' hand, pulling him deeper into the shadows behind a trellis heavy with climbing roses. They pressed against the garden wall, her back to the cold stone, his body shielding her from view as two guards passed by. Their conversation a low murmur about the engagement announcement and the crown prince's choice of bride. In the darkness, Thomas's breath was warm against her cheek. His hand had found her waist again, steadying her. They were too close, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat, close enough to remember what it had felt like to be young and in love and stupid with hope. "Vivian," he breathed. And then she was kissing him again. This kiss was different from the first, not desperate and urgent, but slow and aching and full of goodbye. His hand cupped her face with a gentleness that made her want to weep, and she let herself have this one moment of truth before returning to the endless performance of her life. When they finally broke apart, Her cheeks were wet with tears she didn't remember crying. "I have to go," she whispered. "I know. I won't come back here. It's too dangerous." "I know. Thomas, I—" The words stuck in her throat. "I love you. I've always loved you. I'll die loving you." But what good would it do to speak them aloud now? What purpose beyond cruelty? "Go," Thomas said gently, reading everything she couldn't say in her eyes. "Before someone notices. I'll keep your secret, Vivian. I promise." She nodded, unable to speak, and slipped out from behind the trellis. With shaking hands, she smoothed her hair, adjusted her cloak, and became the Duchess again. By the time she reached the palace doors, her face was composed, her mask firmly in place. But as she re-entered the ballroom, smiling at Lord Cavendish and accepting a glass of wine from a servant, she could still taste Thomas Webb on her lips and feel the weight of the secret had shared settling between them like an invisible thread, binding them together even as everything else forced them apart. Across the room, her son, the Crown Prince Nicholas, was dancing with Lady Helena Marsh, the girl he would marry in the spring. He was so beautiful it hurt to look at him, with Philip's dark eyes and wild curls, Philip's quick laugh and gentle heart. Every day he looked more like his father, and every day Vivian's secret felt heavier. She had 6 months to live. 6 months to ensure no one ever learned the truth. 6 months to protect the son she'd already sacrificed everything for. And now Thomas Webb knew. The gardener's son who had loved her since they were children, who had just promised to carry her secret to his grave. God help them both. The Duke found her an hour later, his hand possessive on her elbow as he steered her away from a conversation with Lady Pemberton. "Where did you disappear to?" Edmund Ashford was 53 years old, silver-haired and coldly handsome in the way of men who've never had to work for anything. His grip was just tight enough to hurt. "I looked for you during the toast." "I needed air," Vivian said smoothly. "The ballroom was stifling." "You embarrassed me." His voice was low, dangerous. "The wife of a duke does not vanish during official functions." "Then perhaps the duke should not leave his wife standing alone for 40 minutes while he flirts with his latest mistress." Vivian smiled sweetly at him, the expression never reaching her eyes. "I counted, Edmund. 40 minutes you spent with Lady Catherine, your hand on her waist, while every person in this room whispered about how little regard you have for your wife." His jaw tightened. "You forget yourself." "No, I've remembered myself perfectly." She pulled her arm free with a sharp twist. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to bed. I have a headache." "You always have a headache when I—" He stopped, something cold flickering in his eyes. "You're not well, are you?" Vivian froze. "What?" "I've noticed the marks on your neck, the way you've been losing weight, the paleness." Edmund studied her face with clinical detachment. "How long?" There was no point in lying. "A few months." "How long do you have?" "The physicians say 6 months, perhaps less." Edmund was quiet for a moment, and Vivian wondered if he would feel anything at all at her impending death. They'd been married 18 years and spoken perhaps 18 honest words to each other. Their entire marriage was a performance, 2 actors playing roles in a play neither had written. "I see," he said finally. "Well, I suppose I should begin looking for a new wife. Someone younger this time, more fertile. You only gave me 1 son, and while Nicholas is adequate, I'd hoped for more heirs." The cruelty of it took her breath away, not because it was surprising, but because even after 18 years, some part of her had still hoped Edmund might be capable of basic human decency. "Yes," she said quietly, "you should do that. Find yourself a nice young girl to destroy. I'm sure there are plenty of desperate fathers willing to sell their daughters to a duke." Edmund's hand shot out, gripping her jaw hard enough to leave bruises. "Watch your tongue, wife. You may be dying, but you're still mine. Remember that." She stared at him with all the hatred she'd accumulated over 18 years. Every moment of humiliation and loneliness and degradation crystallizing into pure, burning rage. "I was never yours, Edmund. Not really. You bought my father's name and my pretty face, but you never owned me." "No?" His smile was cruel. "Then whose were you, Vivian? That peasant boy you used to moon over? The gardener's son?" He laughed when she flinched. "Oh yes, I knew about your little infatuation. Did you think I was blind? I saw how you looked at him at our wedding, how you cried afterward." His grip tightened. "But you married me anyway, because you were smart enough to know that love doesn't put food on the table or jewels around your neck. You chose comfort over passion, just like every other practical woman in history." "Yes," Vivian said coldly, "I did, and I've regretted it every day since." Edmund released her with a shove that sent her stumbling back a step. "Go to bed, then. And when you die, try to do it quietly. I don't want any dramatics." She left without another word, climbing the grand staircase to her chambers, with her head held high, even though her hands were shaking with fury. 2 ladies-in-waiting tried to follow her, but she dismissed them sharply, needing to be alone. In her rooms, a suite of silk and velvet that felt like a gilded cage, Vivian locked the door and finally let herself cry. Not because of Edmund's cruelty, she was long past being hurt by him, but because of everything else. The secret she carried, the son she loved, the man she'd kissed in the garden who still looked at her like she was worth saving. 6 months. That was all she had left. 6 months to ensure Nicholas never learned the truth. 6 months to die quietly and disappear, leaving nothing behind but a portrait in the gallery and a footnote in history. Vivian Ashford, Duchess, died of wasting sickness at age 35. She pressed her hand against the marks on her throat, feeling them burn beneath her palm. The physicians had given her laudanum for the pain, but she rarely took it, afraid of what she might say in her drugged sleep. Too many secrets lived beneath her tongue, waiting to slip free the moment she lost control. A soft knock on her door made her freeze. "Your Grace, it's Sarah." Vivian wiped her eyes quickly. Sarah was her oldest lady-in-waiting, a woman near her own age who had been with her since the beginning. If anyone in the palace could be trusted, it was Sarah. "Come in." Sarah entered carrying a silver tea tray, her expression carefully neutral. She was a plain woman, with kind eyes and hair already gone gray, the widow of a knight who had died at sea. "I thought you might want something for your nerves." "Thank you." Vivian took the cup with shaking hands. Sarah busied herself tidying the room, giving Vivian time to compose herself. Finally, she said quietly, "The Duke was cruel to you tonight." "The Duke is always cruel." Vivian sipped the tea, chamomile and honey, her favorite. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be." Sarah's voice was fierce. "You deserved better than him." "We rarely get what we deserve, Sarah. We get what we're given, and we make the best of it." Sarah was quiet for a moment, folding Vivian's discarded shawl. Then, "I saw you come in from the garden earlier. Your hair was mussed, your lips were red." Vivian's hand stilled on her teacup. "Sarah, I won't say anything." Sarah met her eyes directly. "Whatever you did, whoever you saw, I won't breathe a word. You've earned a moment of happiness, Your Grace. God knows you've had little enough of it." The kindness nearly broke her all over again. "Thank you. Just be careful." Sarah's expression was worried. "The Duke has spies everywhere, and if he suspected you were—" She didn't finish, but Vivian understood. If Edmund suspected she'd been unfaithful, he would destroy her, dying or not. He might even cast doubt on Nicholas's legitimacy out of pure spite. "I know," Vivian said. "It won't happen again." "Good." Sarah squeezed her shoulder gently. "Now, drink your tea and get some rest. You look exhausted." After Sarah left, Vivian sat in the darkness, staring at the cold fireplace and thinking about Thomas Webb's promise. "I'll keep your secret. I'll take it to my grave." She believed him, which meant the secret was safe, which meant when she died, the truth would die with her, and Nicholas could rule without ever knowing he was born of adultery and lies. It was what she wanted, what she'd planned for. So why did it feel like she was still failing somehow, still choosing wrong? Outside her window, the palace gardens sprawled in moonlit shadows. Somewhere out there, Thomas was returning to his small cottage, carrying the weight of her confession, and probably hating her for dragging him into her mess. She touched her lips, remembering the kiss. The way it had felt to be herself for just a moment. Not the Duchess, but Vivian, the girl who had loved wildflowers and poetry, and a boy who had no fortune, but everything else that mattered. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the darkness, to Thomas, to the girl she'd been, to the son who would never know the truth. "I'm so sorry for all of it." No one answered. She hadn't expected them to. 3 days after the ball, a messenger arrived at Thomas Webb's cottage. He was mending a broken section of garden wall when the boy appeared, dressed in palace livery and looking uncomfortable in the modest surroundings. Thomas had been expecting something like this, a summons, maybe, or worse. He'd spent the past 3 days in a state of anxious dread, waiting for guards to arrest him for daring to touch the Duchess. "Thomas Webb?" the boy asked. "That's me." "Message from the palace, sir." The boy held out a sealed letter, the wax bearing the Ashford crest. Thomas's blood ran cold. He took the letter with hands that had worked with soil and stone his entire life, hands that had touched Vivian's face with more tenderness than he'd ever shown anything. "Thank you." The messenger boy hesitated. "There's no reply needed, sir. Just be at the East Garden Gate at midnight tonight. Come alone." Then he was gone, leaving Thomas standing in the autumn sunlight with a letter that felt like a live coal in his palm. He waited until he was inside the cottage before breaking the seal. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, unmistakably hers. "Thomas, I know I said I wouldn't come back. I know it's dangerous and foolish and wrong, but I need your help. Something has happened, and I have no one else I can trust. Please come. I promise this is the last time I'll ask anything of you. V." Thomas read the letter 3 times, then burned it in his fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken into ash. He should refuse. Should send word that he couldn't risk being seen with her, that he'd already done enough by promising to keep her secret. But he knew he would go, had known it from the moment he saw her handwriting. Because he was a fool, and because he'd loved Vivian March since he was 12 years old, and because some promises went deeper than sense or safety. At 1:45, Thomas left his cottage. He walked through the gardens he'd tended for 20 years, past roses he'd pruned and hedges he'd shaped, toward the east gate where Vivian would be waiting. The moon was full and bright, making shadows sharp enough to cut. He found her by the old stone fountain, wrapped in a dark cloak that made her look like a ghost. When she turned to face him, he could see she'd been crying. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "What's wrong?" "Nicholas." Her voice cracked on her son's name. "He came to my rooms this morning. She stopped, struggling for words. "He knows something is wrong. Not the truth, but he knows I'm hiding something. He asked me directly if I was keeping secrets from him." Thomas felt ice slide down his spine. "What did you tell him?" "I lied." Vivian's hands twisted together. "I told him I was just worried about my health, about leaving him." "But he didn't believe me, Thomas. He looked at me with Philip's eyes and said, 'Mother, I've never seen you frightened before. Whatever you're hiding, it must be terrible.'" "He's a smart young man." "Too smart." Vivian moved closer, desperation in every line of her body. "I'm dying faster than the physicians predicted. The sickness is spreading. I can feel it. Maybe I have 3 months left, maybe less. And Nicholas is watching me like a hawk, trying to understand why his mother suddenly seems terrified." "What do you want from me?" Thomas asked, though he already knew. "I need you to befriend him." The words came out in a rush. "I know it's asking too much. I know you owe me nothing. But Nicholas needs someone he can trust, someone who isn't tangled up in palace politics and ambition, someone who will—" her voice broke, "someone who will look after him when I'm gone, make sure he doesn't tear himself apart trying to understand my secrets." "You want me to lie to your son? I want you to protect him from the truth." Vivian's eyes blazed. "If he ever learns he's illegitimate, it will destroy him. It will destroy everything he's built, everyone who depends on him. The kingdom will fracture. People will die in the power struggle that follows. Is that what you want? Civil war because I couldn't keep my legs closed 18 years ago?" The crudeness of it shocked him. "Vivian, it's the truth, isn't it?" She laughed bitterly. "I'm a whore who committed treason, and now I'm asking you to help me cover it up, again, like I asked you to keep my secret 3 nights ago when I kissed you in the garden." "You're not a whore," Thomas said fiercely. "You were lonely and young and human. You made a mistake. That doesn't make you evil, doesn't it?" Vivian's voice was hollow. "I've built Nicholas's entire life on a lie. Every expectation he has, every dream, every plan for his future, all of it based on the assumption that he's the rightful heir. And when I die, the lie continues. He'll become king thinking he earned it through blood, never knowing he only has it because I was too much of a coward to tell the truth 17 years ago." Thomas moved closer, catching her hands in his. "Listen to me. You protected your son. That's what mothers do. They protect their children, even when it costs them everything, even when it means carrying unbearable secrets. At what price?" Vivian looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "At what price, Thomas? My soul? The kingdom's future? Your peace of mind because I dragged you into this nightmare?" "I walked into this with my eyes open," Thomas said. "When I promised to keep your secret, I knew what I was choosing. I'm not going to change my mind now. But will you help me?" Her hands clutched at his. "Will you get to know Nicholas? Be someone he can talk to?" "I'll arrange it. I'll say you're doing specialized work on the palace gardens, that I requested you personally for a project. It will give you access to the grounds, opportunities to speak with him casually. He often walks in the gardens in the morning. If you just happen to be there, if you struck up a friendship." "You want me to manipulate your son." "I want you to be his friend," Vivian corrected desperately. "A real friend. Someone who sees him as a person, not a crown. Someone who—" She stopped, something shifting in her expression. "Someone like you were to me, before everything went wrong." Thomas studied her face in the moonlight, beautiful and desperate and dying by inches. He thought about the Crown Prince Nicholas, a young man he'd seen from a distance at ceremonies and events. He seemed like a good person, earnest and kind, beloved by the staff. He smiled at servants and remembered names. He would make a fine king, legitimate or not. And he would be devastated when his mother died, would probably tear the palace apart looking for answers, trying to understand why she'd seemed so frightened and secretive at the end. Unless someone was there to distract him, to give him friendship and support, and help him grieve without digging too deeply. "All right," Thomas said finally. "I'll do it." Vivian sagged with relief. "Thank you. God, thank you. But I want something in return." He kept his voice steady, even though his heart was pounding. "If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to lie to your son and help you maintain this secret, then I want time with you. Real time. Not stolen moments in the garden at midnight." She stared at him. "What?" "You have 3 months," Thomas said. "Maybe less. And you are going to spend them locked in that palace, playing the perfect Duchess, dying quietly and alone, while Edmund parades his mistresses and Nicholas worrying himself sick. Is that really how you want to spend your last days on Earth? Thomas, I can't just—" "Yes, you can." He squeezed her hands. "You're dying, Vivian. The rules don't matter anymore. They never really did, but they especially don't now. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to start this friendship with Nicholas. I'm going to help you protect your secret, and in exchange, you're going to meet me here, in this garden, at midnight every week. We're going to talk. We're going to remember who we were before life broke us. And you're going to let yourself be Vivian March for a few stolen hours. Not the Duchess who smiles and lies and carries the weight of the world." "That's insane," Vivian whispered. "Probably." Thomas smiled at her, sad and fierce. "But what are they going to do? Arrest you? You're dying anyway. Execute me? I've been half dead since you married Edmund. At least this way we get something real before the end. Someone will find out. Maybe. Let them." Thomas cupped her face, making her look at him. "I don't care anymore, Vivian. I've spent 18 years caring about what people think, about following the rules, about knowing my place. And where has it gotten me? A cottage and a garden and decades of loving a woman I can never have. Well, I'm done with that. If we only have 3 months, I want them to matter." Vivian's tears fell freely now. "You're going to get us both killed. We're already dying." Thomas leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "At least let's die having lived first." She kissed him then, desperate and real and breaking apart at the seams. When they finally pulled apart, she was shaking. "Every week," she agreed. "Midnight. Here. Every week," Thomas confirmed. "And you'll watch over Nicholas. You'll make sure he's all right when I—" She couldn't finish. "I promise." Vivian nodded, composing herself with visible effort. "I should go." "Yes." Neither of them moved. "Thomas," Vivian said softly, "in another life—" "I know." He released her reluctantly. "In another life, everything would have been different. Do you ever wonder what that life looked like?" "Every day." Thomas stepped back, putting distance between them before his resolve broke completely. "Every single day." Vivian pulled her cloak tight and slipped away into the shadows, leaving Thomas alone by the fountain. He stayed there for a long time after she was gone, staring up at the moon and thinking about the impossible thing he'd just agreed to. He was going to befriend the Crown Prince, lie to him, protect him from a truth that would destroy him. And in exchange, he was going to spend Vivian's final months giving her the one thing she'd never had, freedom to be herself. It was madness. It was dangerous. It would probably end in disaster. But God help him, he was going to do it anyway. Thomas met Crown Prince Nicholas 6 days later in the East Garden, exactly as Vivian had arranged. The morning was crisp and golden, autumn at its peak. Thomas was pruning a line of hawthorn bushes when the prince appeared on his morning walk, dressed simply in riding clothes, with no attendants. "You must be Webb," Nicholas said, stopping to watch him work. "Mother said you'd be doing special work on the gardens." Thomas straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. Up close, the prince was even more like Philip Morland than Thomas had realized. Same dark curls, same thoughtful eyes, same quick smile. It hurt to look at him, knowing the truth. "Your Highness, yes, the Duchess commissioned some redesign work. She loves these gardens." Nicholas looked around, his expression fond. "When I was a boy, she used to bring me here every morning. We'd walk for hours while she taught me the names of every plant, every tree." She said a good ruler knows his land from the ground up, not just from the palace windows. Sounds like wise advice. She's full of wisdom, my mother. Nicholas smiled slightly. Though lately she seems troubled, distracted. Have you noticed anything unusual about the grounds? Anywhere she's been spending time? So the prince was already suspicious, already looking for answers. Thomas chose his words carefully. "The Duchess comes here sometimes in the evening. I think she finds the gardens peaceful." Peaceful. Nicholas repeated the word like he was testing it. "Yes, she would need that, I suppose. With father being—" He stopped, seeming to remember he was talking to a servant. "Forgive me, I shouldn't speak of such things." "I'm just a gardener, Your Highness," Thomas said mildly. "I'm not likely to repeat anything to the court." Nicholas studied him for a moment, something shifting in his expression. "No, I don't think you would." He moved closer, examining the hawthorn Thomas had been pruning. "You know your work. These bushes are healthier than I've seen them in years." "Thank you, Your Highness." "Nicholas is fine when we're alone." The prince picked up Thomas's pruning shears, testing the weight. "I've never been much for ceremony. Drives father mad." He smiled wryly. "Of course, everything I do drives father mad. I'm too soft, he says. Too concerned with things like justice and fairness. He thinks a good king should rule with an iron fist, not an open hand. What do you think?" Nicholas glanced at him, surprised by the question. I think people will follow you further if you give them a reason to love you rather than fear you." "But what do I know? I'm just a young man who's never seen war or real hardship. Maybe father's right. Maybe I'm too idealistic. Or maybe the world needs more idealists," Thomas suggested. "Maybe." Nicholas handed back the shears. "Webb, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Your Highness." "Nicholas," he corrected absently. "Do you think my mother is happy?" The question hit Thomas like a fist. He thought about Vivian 3 nights ago, crying in his arms. Vivian 18 years ago, walking down the aisle toward Edmund with tears streaming down her face. Vivian at 17, giving him wildflowers and laughing in the sun before her father sold her to the highest bidder. "I think," Thomas said carefully, "that happiness is complicated, especially for women in her position." "That's not an answer." "No, it's not." Thomas met the prince's eyes directly. "But it's the truth. Your mother has done her duty. She's been a good wife and an excellent mother and served the crown with grace. Whether any of that made her happy," he shrugged, "that's a question only she can answer." Nicholas was quiet for a long moment, staring at the garden. "She's dying, you know." "I know. The physicians say 3 months, maybe less." Nicholas's voice cracked. "And she won't talk about it, won't let me comfort her or help her. She just smiles and tells me everything is fine, like I'm still a child who needs to be protected from ugly truths." "Maybe she's trying to protect herself," Thomas said. "Sometimes it's easier to keep painful things private, to not burden the people we love." "I'd rather be burdened than shut out." Nicholas's hands clenched at his sides. "She's my mother. I should be there for her at the end. But she won't let me in, and I don't know why." Because she's carrying a secret that would destroy your entire world, Thomas thought. Because she loves you too much to burden you with the truth. Because she's dying alone to keep you safe. Give her grace, he said aloud. People face death differently. Maybe she needs to do this her own way. Maybe. Nicholas didn't sound convinced. Webb, Thomas, if I may call you that, would you do me a favor? If I can, Your Highness. Watch over her. When she comes to the gardens, make sure she's safe. I know it's asking a lot, but Nicholas stopped, struggling with emotion.
I can't always be there, and I think she finds the gardens comforting. If you could just keep an eye out, make sure she's... He couldn't finish. I'll watch over her, Thomas promised, the words heavy with double meaning. You have my word. Thank you. Nicholas gripped his shoulder briefly. That means more than you know. They talked for a while longer about gardens and roses and the small, careful things that let two strangers begin to build a friendship. By the time Nicholas left, Thomas felt like he'd been run over by a carriage. The prince was a good man, kind and genuine, and trying desperately to understand his mother before she died. And Thomas was going to spend the next 3 months lying to him, distracting him, keeping him from the truth that would shatter everything he believed about himself. It felt like a betrayal of the worst kind. But he'd promised Vivian, and he kept his promises, even the ones that hurt. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. By day, Thomas worked in the palace gardens and cultivated his friendship with Crown Prince Nicholas. They talked about everything, politics and philosophy, justice and mercy, what it meant to rule well. Nicholas was brilliant and compassionate, exactly the kind of king the realm needed. And every conversation made Thomas feel sicker about the lie they were all protecting. But he kept his promise. He distracted Nicholas when the prince seemed ready to push his mother for answers. He provided comfort and friendship and a listening ear when Nicholas worried about losing her. He became the confidant Vivian had asked him to be. And at midnight every week, he met Vivian in the garden. Those stolen hours became everything. They would sit by the fountain and talk about anything except death and secrets and the life they'd never had. Sometimes they talked about their childhoods, about the girl and boy they'd been before everything got complicated. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just sat in comfortable silence, her head on his shoulder, his hand in hers. The sickness was claiming her by inches. Each week she was thinner, paler, the marks on her throat spreading like a dark map of her mortality. But in the garden at midnight, she let herself be Vivian March again, not the Duchess, not a woman dying, just a girl who had once loved wildflowers and poetry and a boy who saw her for who she truly was. "Tell me something true," she said one night in late October, wrapped in his cloak because she was always cold now. "Something you've never told anyone." Thomas thought for a moment, searching for truth in the mess of lies surrounding them. "I almost came for you." "What?" "Your wedding day." The confession felt like broken glass in his throat. "I almost came for you. I had this mad plan. I would burst into the cathedral and object when the priest asked if anyone knew why you shouldn't marry Edmund. I would stand up and say, because she's mine, because I love her and she loves me, and this is wrong." Vivian's breath caught. "Why didn't you?" "My father stopped me." Thomas stared at the stars. "He found me getting ready, saw what I was planning. He said, 'Son, if you do this, you'll ruin her. Not save her, ruin her. She'll be a scandal, damaged goods, and no one will marry her. Her father will cast her out. She'll have nothing. Is that what you want? To destroy her, trying to save her? So you let me go. I let you go." Thomas's voice broke.
I told myself it was the noble thing to do, that I was protecting you. But maybe I was just a coward. Maybe if I'd been brave enough, I would have stopped you," Vivian interrupted. "If you'd objected at my wedding, I would have told the priest you were mad, that I'd never loved you. I would have married Edmund anyway, because I was 17 and terrified and convinced I had no other choice." "Would you?" Thomas looked at her. "Really?" Vivian was quiet for a long moment.
"I don't know," she admitted finally. "Maybe, probably. But there's a part of me that wonders if I would have been brave enough to run, to choose love over safety, to bet everything on us. We'll never know now." "No," she leaned into him. "We'll never know." They sat in silence, and Thomas tried not to think about all the different versions of their life that could have existed if they'd made different choices, if he'd been braver, if she'd been less practical, if the world had been kinder to people who had nothing but love. "Your turn," he said eventually. "Tell me something true." Vivian's hand found his. "I never loved Philip." Thomas went still. "What?" "My affair with Philip Moreland." Her voice was hollow. "I didn't love him. I barely liked him. He was kind to me when I was lonely, and I was desperate enough to mistake kindness for affection. But love?" She shook her head. "No. I've only ever loved one person my entire life." Thomas' heart felt like it was breaking and mending and breaking again all at once. "Vivian, I'm not telling you this to hurt you," she said quickly. "I'm telling you because I want you to know, because when I die, I want someone to know the truth, that I never stopped loving you, that everything I did, marrying Edmund, having the affair, protecting Nicholas, lying for 17 years, all of it was done with the ghost of you watching from the corner of my heart." "That's not fair," Thomas said roughly. "You can't tell me that now, when we've lost everything and there's no time left." "When else would I tell you?" Vivian looked at him, her smoke-gray eyes fierce. "When I'm dead? When you're standing at my grave wondering if any of this mattered? At least now you know. At least I said it while I still could." Thomas pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like roses and sickness and all the might-have-beens in the world. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "God help me, I love you. I've always loved you. I'll die loving you." "I know." Vivian's arms tightened around him. "I know." They held each other by the fountain while the moon watched and the roses listened, two people who had lost everything except each other, trying to make peace with a story that would never have a happy ending. In mid-November, Edmund summoned Thomas to his study. Thomas had been expecting something like this. The Duke was not stupid. He knew his wife was sneaking out at night, and he would eventually wonder who she was meeting. That he'd waited this long spoke to either arrogance or indifference, probably both. The study was all dark wood and hunting trophies, the room of a man who treated everything as prey to be conquered. Edmund sat behind his massive desk, looking at Thomas with cold calculation. "You've become friendly with my son," the Duke said without preamble. "The Crown Prince has been kind enough to speak with me occasionally," Thomas replied carefully. "I'm honored by his attention." "Don't play humble with me, Gardner." Edmund's smile was sharp. "I know you're meeting my wife in the gardens at midnight." Thomas felt ice slide through his veins, but kept his expression neutral. "I don't know what you mean, Your Grace." "Spare me the lies." Edmund stood, moving to pour himself a drink. "I have spies everywhere in this palace. Did you really think you could carry on a midnight romance with the Duchess and no one would notice?" "I'm not—" "I don't care," Edmund interrupted. "Truly, my wife is dying. If she wants to spend her last weeks fucking a peasant in the garden, that's her business. I've already taken 3 mistresses since learning of her illness. Why shouldn't she have her fun too?" The crudeness of it made Thomas want to put his fist through the Duke's face. Then why summon me? Because I want to know what she's telling you. Edmund turned, drink in hand, expression calculating. Vivian has been carrying secrets for years. I've always known it. And now she's dying. And dying people tend to confess things, tend to unburden their guilty consciences. So I want to know, what has she told you? Thomas's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. We talk about the gardens, Your Grace, about her childhood, about Nicholas? Edmund's eyes sharpened. About my son? She worries about leaving him, Thomas said, which was true enough. She wants to make sure he'll be all right when she's gone. Does she? Edmund studied him over the rim of his glass. And what else? Nothing that concerns you, Your Grace. Everything about my wife concerns me. Edmund's voice went cold. She is my property until she dies. Her secrets are mine. Her past is mine. Even her pathetic little affair with you is mine. Because I allow it to continue. Then why are you questioning me? Thomas asked. If you know everything, what do you need from me? Edmund's smile was slow and cruel. Insurance. You see, I don't fully trust that Vivian hasn't told you something that could damage my family's reputation. Some indiscretion, some scandal. And I want to ensure that whatever she's told you dies with her. I would never. Of course you wouldn't, because you love her. Edmund said it mockingly. The faithful peasant in love with the beautiful Duchess. It's quite touching, really. Almost poetic. He moved closer. But here's what you need to understand. When Vivian dies, your little friendship with Nicholas ends. You go back to being invisible. A gardener, nothing more. And if I ever hear even a whisper that you've spoken about my wife inappropriately, shared any secrets she may have told you, or attempted to leverage your connection to the Crown Prince, he stopped, letting the threat hang. Well, accidents happen in gardens. Men fall from ladders, get trampled by horses, disappear. Thomas forced himself to meet the Duke's eyes without flinching. I understand, Your Grace. Good. Edmund returned to his desk, dismissing him. You may continue your midnight meetings with my wife. As I said, I don't care. She's dying anyway. Let her have this one small rebellion before the end. Thomas left the study feeling sick. The Duke knew. Not everything, not the secret about Nicholas, but enough to be dangerous. And while Edmund claimed not to care about the affair, Thomas knew better. Men like the Duke didn't forgive slights to their pride, even small ones. When Thomas met Vivian that night, he told her everything. She listened in silence, her face going paler with each word. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. He's bluffing, she said finally, but her voice shook. Edmund won't kill you. It would raise too many questions. Maybe. Thomas wasn't convinced. But we need to be careful. If he suspects... He already suspects. Vivian's hands clenched. Edmund isn't stupid. He knows I'm keeping secrets. He just doesn't know which secrets matter. She looked at Thomas, desperation in her eyes. We can't stop meeting. These hours with you are the only thing keeping me sane. Please, Thomas, don't let him take this from me too. I'm not going anywhere, Thomas promised, even though fear curled in his gut. We'll be careful. We'll watch for spies. But I'm not leaving you to face this alone. Vivian kissed him, desperate and grateful. What did I do to deserve you? You gave me wildflowers when we were 12, Thomas said, making her smile despite everything. You ruined me for anyone else the moment you smiled at me. I'm sorry. Don't be. He pulled her close. I'd rather have loved you and lost you than never loved you at all. That's a lie. Probably. Thomas rested his chin on her head. But it sounds noble, doesn't it? She laughed, the sound raw and broken and real. They sat together in the darkness, and Thomas tried not to think about the Duke's threats or the ticking clock of Vivian's illness or the secret that could destroy everything. For now, he had this. Her in his arms, the roses blooming despite the November cold, and a few stolen hours where they could pretend the world was kinder than it was. It would have to be enough. December came with snow and bitter cold. Vivian's condition worsened rapidly. She could barely walk now without assistance, and the marks on her throat had spread to her chest and arms, angry red welts that looked like burns. The physicians increased her laudanum, but she refused to take much, still afraid of what she might confess in her drugged state. Crown Prince Nicholas was frantic with worry. He spent hours at his mother's bedside, trying to comfort her, trying to understand why she seemed so afraid. And when the fear became too much, he would find Thomas in the gardens and talk until his voice went hoarse. "She's dying," Nicholas said one gray morning, his breath fogging in the cold. "And I still don't understand what she's so frightened of. It's not death itself. Mother has never feared death. It's something else, something she thinks I can't know." "Maybe it's a mother's instinct," Thomas suggested, hating himself for the lie. "I'm not a child," Nicholas' voice was bitter. "I'm 21 years old. I'm engaged to be married. I'll be king someday. But she still treats me like I'm fragile, like the truth, whatever it is, would break me." Would it? Thomas wondered. If Nicholas learned he was illegitimate, that his entire identity was built on a lie, would he survive it? Or would the revelation destroy him the way Vivian feared? "She loves you," Thomas said, because that at least was true. Sometimes love looks like protection, even when that protection hurts. "I know she loves me." Nicholas scrubbed a hand over his face. "But I wish she trusted me enough to tell me the truth, whatever it is. I could handle it, Thomas. I'm stronger than she thinks." "Maybe you are," Thomas thought. "Or maybe you only think you are, because you've never been truly tested." "Give her peace," he said aloud. "That's what she needs from you right now. Not questions or demands for truth, just peace. Let her die knowing you'll be all right." Nicholas looked at him for a long moment. "You care about her." It wasn't a question, but Thomas answered anyway. "Yes. More than a gardener should care about the Duchess." Thomas's heart stopped. "Your Highness." "It's all right." Nicholas held up a hand. "I'm not going to say anything. If my mother finds comfort in your presence, who am I to judge?" His smile was sad. "We all need someone who sees us as we truly are, not as the world expects us to be. If you're that person for her," he shrugged, "then I'm grateful." Thomas didn't know what to say. The prince's kindness felt like another betrayal, another lie he was complicit in. "Thank you," he managed finally. Nicholas gripped his shoulder. "Watch over her. When I can't be there, please." "Always," Thomas promised. After the prince left, Thomas stood in the snowy garden and wondered how everything had gotten so complicated. He'd started this wanting to help Vivian, to give her comfort in her final months, to protect the secret that would destroy her son. But somewhere along the way, he'd started to care about Nicholas too, to see him not just as the illegitimate heir who needed to be protected from the truth, but as a good man who deserved better than the web of lies surrounding him. It made everything harder. That night, when Vivian came to the garden, she could barely walk. Thomas caught her as she stumbled, and he was shocked by how little she weighed, how fragile she'd become. "I'm dying," she said simply. "The physicians say days now, maybe a week." Thomas felt the world tilt. "No." "Yes." Vivian looked up at him, and her eyes were clear despite the pain she must be in. "I need to say goodbye, Thomas, while I still can." "Don't," his voice cracked. "Please don't."
"I have to." She touched his face with shaking hands. "I need you to know, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. Every stolen hour, every midnight conversation, every moment I got to be just Vivian instead of the Duchess, they were everything to me. You don't have to do this now. When else?" She smiled sadly. "I won't be able to leave my rooms after tonight. This is our last time, Thomas. Our last chance to say what needs to be said." Thomas pulled her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest, too fast and irregular. "I love you. That's all that needs to be said. I love you, and I always will." "I love you too." Vivian's tears soaked into his shirt. "And I'm so sorry. Sorry for marrying Edmund. Sorry for dragging you into this mess. Sorry for asking you to lie to Nicholas. Sorry for all of it." "I'd do it all again," Thomas said fiercely. "Every moment, every lie, every risk. If it meant having this, having you, I'd do it all again." They held each other in the snow, while the palace slept, and the moon watched, and the hours slipped away like sand through their fingers. Eventually, Vivian pulled back, her face streaked with tears. "I need you to promise me something," she said. "Anything. Watch over Nicholas after I'm gone. Not just for me, for him. He's going to need someone who isn't part of the court games, someone who sees him as a person. Promise me you'll be that for him." "I promise." "And the secret dies with you," Thomas finished. "I swear it. Nicholas will never know. Thank you." Vivian kissed him one last time, soft and lingering and full of goodbye. "Thank you for everything. For loving me when I didn't deserve it. For seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. For giving me these last few months of being real." "You always deserved it," Thomas said roughly. "Always." They parted at dawn, and Thomas watched her make her slow, painful way back to the palace. She looked back once, and the expression on her face was everything. Love and regret and gratitude and grief all tangled together. Then she was gone, and Thomas stood alone in the snow, feeling like he'd lost her all over again. Then Duchess Vivian Ashford died 4 days later, in her sleep, with Crown Prince Nicholas holding her hand. Thomas heard the bells toll at dawn and knew. He dropped his pruning shears and stood in the garden where they'd met all those midnights, feeling the world shift around him. She was gone. The girl who'd given him wildflowers, the woman who'd kissed him in the darkness, the Duchess who'd carried a terrible secret to her grave. She was gone, and he was still here, and somehow he had to figure out how to keep breathing. The funeral was 3 days later. Thomas stood at the back of the cathedral with the other servants, watching as they laid Vivian to rest with all the ceremony befitting a duchess. Crown Prince Nicholas delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking as he spoke about his mother's grace, her wisdom, her love. "She taught me," Nicholas said, tears streaming down his face, "that a good ruler leads with compassion, not cruelty. That power is a responsibility, not a privilege. That the people we serve are not subjects to be controlled, but lives to be cherished." He paused, struggling for composure. "She was the finest woman I've ever known, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her legacy." Thomas felt his own tears fall, silent and unstoppable. Vivian would have been so proud of her son, would have loved hearing him speak those words. And she died knowing he would never learn the truth, that her secret was safe, that Nicholas would rule believing he had every right to the crown. It should have felt like victory, like mission accomplished. Instead, it just felt like loss. After the funeral, Thomas returned to his cottage. He tried to work, to lose himself in the familiar rhythms of gardening, but everything reminded him of her. The roses he'd pruned while she watched, the fountain where they'd shared so many midnights. The entire palace garden was haunted by her ghost. A week after the funeral, Crown Prince Nicholas found him by the east gate. "Thomas," the prince said quietly, "walk with me." They walked in silence through the garden, past the places where Vivian had loved to sit, where she'd taught Nicholas plant names as a child, where she'd met Thomas in secret and let herself be real for a few stolen hours. Finally, Nicholas stopped by the old stone fountain. "My mother loved this place." "Yes," Thomas agreed softly. "She did." "I used to wonder why." Nicholas touched the worn stone. "It's just a fountain, just a garden. But she would spend hours here, especially at the end. Almost like she was meeting someone." He looked at Thomas directly. "Someone who made her happy." Thomas's heart stopped. "Your Highness." "I'm not asking you to confirm anything," Nicholas interrupted gently. I'm thanking you for whatever comfort you gave her, for seeing her as a person, not just a duchess, for making her last months less lonely." Thomas couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. "She left you something," Nicholas continued, pulling a sealed letter from his jacket. "She gave it to me a week before she died. I think she meant it for you." Thomas took the letter with shaking hands. The seal bore Vivian's personal crest, the one she rarely used. "I'll leave you alone," Nicholas said. "But Thomas, thank you for caring about her. It means more than you know." After the prince left, Thomas sat by the fountain, their fountain, and broke the seal with trembling fingers. Vivian's handwriting swam before his eyes. "My dearest Thomas, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're still there, carrying our secret, wondering if any of this mattered. It mattered. Every moment mattered. Every midnight, every conversation, every time you looked at me like I was still worth something. It all mattered. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you. Sorry for asking you to lie to Nicholas, to protect a secret that isn't yours to keep. But I couldn't think of anyone else I trusted to do it, anyone else who would understand why the lie is necessary. Nicholas is a good man. He'll make a wonderful king. And that's because he believes he was born to it, raised for it, destined for it. If he learned the truth, that he's illegitimate, that his entire identity is built on lies, it would destroy the confidence that makes him strong. So please, Thomas, keep the secret. Let him believe. Let him rule the way I raised him to rule, with compassion and wisdom and the certainty that he belongs on that throne. And forgive me for loving you and leaving you, for being too afraid to choose you when we were young, for wasting 18 years when we could have had something real. I died loving you. That's worth knowing, I think, that in all the lies and performances and compromises, one thing stayed true: my love for you. Thank you for the wildflowers all those years ago. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for giving me these last few months of being real. Live, Thomas. Please live. Don't let this secret turn you into a ghost. Find joy where you can. Love again if you're able. Be the good, kind man I always knew you were. And when you think of me, remember the girl who gave you wildflowers, not the Duchess who died protecting lies. All my love, always. Vivian. Thomas read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and tucked it inside his shirt, close to his heart. He sat by the fountain as the sun set, as shadows crept across the garden, As the first stars appeared overhead, she was gone. The secret was safe. Nicholas would rule, and no one would ever know the truth. It was what she wanted, what she'd given everything to protect. And Thomas would honor it, because he'd loved her and because he kept his promises, even the ones that hurt. Epilogue. 5 years later, Thomas stood in the royal garden, watching King Nicholas address a crowd of citizens. The crown prince had become king 2 years earlier when Duke Edmund died suddenly of a heart attack, surprising no one who'd known the man's temper and appetite for excess. King Nicholas ruled with the compassion and wisdom his mother had taught him. He'd implemented reforms to help the poor, established schools in the provinces, and governed with a gentle hand that earned him deep loyalty from his people. He was beloved in a way his father never had been, respected in a way Edmund couldn't comprehend. And he never learned the truth. Thomas had kept his promise, kept Vivian's secret, carried it alone through 5 years of serving a king who thought him simply a trusted gardener, a man who'd been kind to his mother at the end. Sometimes Thomas wondered if he should have told the truth, if Nicholas had a right to know, if secrets were ever really worth keeping. But then he'd see the king laughing with his young son, Prince Edmund, named for the grandfather, but with none of his cruelty. Or hear about another reform, another act of compassion that made the kingdom better. And Thomas would remember Vivian's letter, remember her certainty that the lie was necessary to protect not just Nicholas, but the kingdom itself. So he kept her secret, tended the garden, lived the quiet life of a man who'd loved deeply and lost completely, but survived anyway. On the 5th anniversary of Vivian's death, Thomas placed wildflowers on her grave, the same kind he'd given her when they were 12, when the world was simpler and love seemed like something that could conquer anything.
"I kept my promise," he whispered to the cold marble. "He's a good king, a great one, everything you hoped he'd be." The wind rustled through the trees, and Thomas imagined he could hear her voice on it. "Thank you. I miss you," he said, "every day, every midnight when I walk past the fountain and remember. I miss you." No answer came, because the dead don't speak. But Thomas felt it anyway, a warmth in his chest, a sense of peace that maybe, just maybe, he'd done right by her. That the love they'd shared, brief and stolen and impossible, had mattered. He stood for a while longer, letting himself remember. Then he walked back through the garden, past the fountain where they'd met all those midnights, toward the cottage where he'd spent 5 years learning how to live with ghosts. Behind him, roses bloomed despite the winter cold, and somewhere, he wanted to believe, Vivian March was at peace, free of secrets and lies and the gilded cage of nobility. Free to be the girl who'd loved wildflowers and poetry, and a boy who'd kept his promises, even the ones that hurt. The end.